Ivy and Gecko acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and future. Welcome to Hearts and Minds. Our podcast episodes feature conversations with highly accomplished mining executives and board directors. We'll explore critical themes relating to leadership impact, staff engagement and culture development. So tune in, enjoy the conversations and prepare to be inspired. I'm Alana Bray-White, the Managing Director of Ivy and Gecko, and this is our podcast, Hearts and Minds.
If you take Genesis for argument's sake, our core value we call Aspire, A-S-P-I-R-E. That's written on our chart. And A is for accountable, S for sustainable, P for people first, I for integrity, R for results, and E for empower. I've seen people who will just take someone by the nose, and at the end of the day, if you micromanage, the person does not develop character and the ability to make his or own decision in a crisis situation. Mining has its moments. And if David Bilby has micromanaged Tony Kiernan and something happens, I can't get onto David because his phone's not working.
Our guest today is Tony Kiernan, a former solicitor with extensive experience in the management and operation of listed public companies. As both a consultant and a lawyer, he has practiced and advised extensively in the fields of resources and business generally. Tony is also a proud member of the Order of Australia. Tony has served as a director of numerous companies and not-for-profits, including Pilbara Minerals, Dacian Gold, Venturix Resources, Saracen Minerals, Northern Star Resources, and the Fiona Wood Foundation. He is currently the non-executive chairman of Genesis Minerals, an ASX-listed gold house focused on the prolific Leonora district in Western Australia. Tony is one of Australia's most respected business leaders, and when he accepted our invitation to be a guest on Hearts and Minds, well, we knew he'd have plenty to say. In this episode, he passes judgement on Elon Musk, the brilliance of Singapore statesman Kuan, and the remarkable leadership qualities of AFL Hall of Famer and legendary Bombers coach Kevin Sheedy. He shares insights on his approach to managing board dynamics and cultivating relationships with key executives, and he suggests what the mining industry could be doing to attract and develop leaders of the future. There's sure to be value in this episode for you, and we hope you enjoy listening to it.
Tony, thanks for joining us in the studio today.
Thank you, David.
I thought you'd have your MAGA hat on.
Make America great again, yes.
Yeah.
No. It's in the cupboard.
Interesting bit of theatre and entertainment for us, isn't it?
Yes, certainly, very much so. Quite a surprise. But as I was saying to you before, I think Trump was able to have a vision, whereas Kamala Harris covered a lot of issues. But when you boil it down to what was her vision, his is a simple one: make America great again. So
and you can win even if you tell racist jokes about significant parts of the population. It's amazing.
You can be a sex offender, you can be a tax dodger, you can be a criminal, you can do all those sorts of things.
Well, there's hope for us yet, Tony.
But, okay.
Tony, as you know, this podcast is all about leadership and its impact on engagement with people and culture development within mining businesses. Now, you've got a long history of association with the mining industry as a company director in particular, so we'd love to get some insights from you, which hopefully will be of value to some people.
Sure, appreciate that.
Before we go there, let's start with your backstory. What can you tell us about your early years? Where did you grow up? What was it like at the time?
I'm a Perth boy, born and bred in Perth, born in Subiaco. As with you, I was a college boy. I had the privilege to go to Guildford Grammar School. And then I went on to university, law degree, UWA. I've got family here. I've got 3 children, got 3 grandkids. So and the family traditionally my family was a transport company.
Okay.
James Kiernan Transport. So many of my earlier days was living in front of or behind the transport depot. Yeah. So I would get taken to school, or primary school, in a truck.
Yeah, great. Dropped off at schoolhouse at Guildford.
Oh, no, that was when I was in primary school.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Primary school.
Was there an event or a realisation that proved to be a tipping point in your life? I know you went to university, did law. When did you decide that this was to be my career route?
When I was not going to be a full-time lawyer.
Okay.
Look, I know I practiced for a number of years, but I got the opportunity to go as in-house lawyer at Channel 9 in Perth, which was Channel 9 6KY.
Okay.
In fact, I sort of had a bit of an inside running. My father was the managing director, and he said to me once, after I've been practicing law for a while, he said, it's getting quite complicated. We actually need to employ a lawyer. To which I said, well, if you're going to advertise, I'll apply. And he said, well, if you're going to apply, you don't need to apply. Anyway, the upshot of it was, David, I went into a commercial organisation.
Yep.
And probably that sort of demonstrated to me that I don't think I really ever wanted to be a lawyer full time.
Yeah.
So I think that was a defining event.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I did law for 1 year and failed and hated it, and it was a sliding door moment for me. I thought, well, I know what I don't want to be and can't be, and I went down the route of organisational psychology and HR, which I'm glad I did.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was an interesting time. I mean, I had the opportunity to sit on a couple of boards of the radio station and that sort of stuff, and then the Bond Corporation made a takeover bid. I was actually general manager of Radio 6KY. Look at me, David. Would you believe I actually ran a radio station? Dealing with all those strange people, but that taught me about revenue and ratings and that sort of stuff.
6KY takes me back. That was easy. Was the tagline "easy listening"?
Easy listening, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But anyway, Bond Corporation took it over, and I remember driving in one day thinking, because Bond Corporation had a lot of debt, I thought, I think I'm going to be dealing with, the administrator. Anyway, I made a decision to leave Channel 9. And then I went to West Perth, started practicing as a lawyer. My good mate, Timmy Goyder, Tim himself, still great mates, as you'd know Tim, you know who he is.
Yep.
We shared an office together. I did a bit of basic legal work. It was a time in which there were a lot of junior mining companies starting, and they couldn't afford legal fees. So I quite often just took shares for my legal fees. And of course, Tim was quite active in the junior end of the space, so that sort of brought me onto a couple of boards, and that's probably where the resources started.
Yeah, interesting. You've been in the mining industry now as a director for quite a long time. How has the responsibilities and the context of directorship changed over that time?
Yeah, it's changed enormously. I mean, if I go back, as I said, I started in the junior space, and we had market capitalizations of less than $1 billion, always running out of money, and then put that forward. I mean, when I was chairman of Pilbara, we got to a market capitalization of $15 billion. We had a market cap of about $5 billion more than Qantas. That brings a different set of shareholders, a different set of responsibilities as a director. Your fundamental obligation is still there to act in the best interest of shareholders and that sort of stuff. But no, the responsibilities have changed enormously over the years. The requirements for public companies to do a little bit more than simply shareholder value, but embrace their community, whether it's Indigenous and that sort of stuff. So it has changed markedly.
Yeah.
And I find it quite frustrating at times, David, because I'm very much focused on, if you deal with people, talk to people, that I'm always about shareholder value. And I find sometimes the stresses and strains on you for governance and that sort of stuff takes you away from what I call non-tool time.
Yes.
So I find that a little bit frustrating.
It's a good point. We'll drill down on that topic a little bit later. When you're not concentrating on your work, Tony, what do you do to relax?
I read a fair bit, David. I follow the news, current affairs. I love my sport. I've been a Dockers member since day one.
I'm sorry for you.
I don't think I'll see a premiership in my life. But no, I read a bit, and you won't be surprised that my current book is called The Chairman's Lounge, which is following on from Qantas.
Yeah. Is that a good read?
I've not read a lot of it. I haven't got too far into it, but look, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
But I like business books. I like strategy books, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And probably the last one I read before Chairman's Lounge was the biography of that crazy man called Elon Musk, who is definitely a crazy man.
Yeah.
So bright.
No doubt he'll be in the cabinet of Donald Trump very shortly.
He says he's got 3 trillion costs to save.
Yeah. Interesting man indeed.
Yeah.
I'm a business book reader as well, and open on my bedside table at the moment is the first and only book I've read from Henry Kissinger, the late Henry Kissinger. I think he died last year. But he wrote a book on leadership, and he selected 6 former presidents or prime ministers that he was close to in the 60s, 70s and 80s, and shares some insights about their style, their approach. It's quite revealing and candid.
I've read it. I mean, I think one of the 6 he does is Lee Kuan Yew.
Correct.
And if you follow the history of Singapore, which, as you know, was just a rock, and then in the sort of the 70s, 80s, 90s became a financial centre.
Yeah.
When you look at the growth of that, it's just talk about Lee Kuan Yew. Obviously, yesterday we're focused very much on democracy. Lee Kuan Yew doesn't believe in democracy in the sense because he said you get elected by promising as much as you can. But he had a view that if you were on if you were 30, had a family and a job, you got 2 votes. Okay.
Right.
When you're 60, you had to hand 1 back.
Yeah.
But it was just an interesting approach.
Was that a formal policy or was that?
No, that's his view.
Okay.
If you listen to a podcast of Lee Kuan Yew, who had a vision and he very much believes in you need to be invested in the system.
Yeah. Is he still around?
Lee Kuan Yew?
Alive?
I think his son is the Prime Minister of Singapore. I don't know.
Yeah, fascinating city-state, isn't it?
Yeah.
A great case study in business success.
Yep.
Let's talk about stakeholder engagement. When you're looking into selecting a key mining executive, a CEO, let's say, what are the personal qualities that they must bring to the table? And what are the most informing questions that you need to ask a candidate applying for a CEO position?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, you need to start with the person, he or she's appropriate technical skills.
Yes.
They've got to have a background in that discipline, whether it's engineering, geology, and that. So you need to satisfy yourself on that. But really, you need to just sit down and talk to the person to get an appreciation of them from a cultural point of view.
Yeah.
Their understanding of accountability, because if you're a chief executive or a senior, even if you're a foreman, you make an assessment about accountability.
Yes.
The person. So that I certainly look for an understanding of whatever industry it is, accountability. But one of the things you've really got to look at is the person's ability to withstand crisis situations. If you're in the resources space, you're going to have them.
Lots of highs and lows.
Whether it's a geological failure, whether it's a pit or whatever it is, or you have a collapse in resource price, and you've got to work your balance sheet on that. So. It's so. I would say it's. You look at good character.
Yeah.
You look at resilience, David. You really look at resilience and also accountability. Because accountability is a word that people don't like to use, but everyone should be accountable. I've always taken the view that the person on reception is accountable for his or her job, and a manager. Some managers have difficulty in talking to the people below them about their accountability.
You mentioned some really important qualities there, including resilience. How do you measure these things? Do you simply need to look at the history, talk to people that have known that individual in the past and ask relevant questions? How else do you establish whether they meet those criteria?
Obviously, you do talk to people, and then if you're engaged by me to employ a key mining executive, I would be asking you, I'd be saying, let's leave the CV aside here, David. You're an experienced sort of guy. And one of the things I find with your industry, with respect or whatever it is that sometimes you put forward a candidate, but you don't actually explain that candidate. To me, that's so important because everyone interviews differently. Some people do it well, some do it badly, and that you know yourself. So one of the things I'd be looking at if you're in, so you talk to the person, you talk to hundreds of people, you give me your insight into that individual. But at the end of the day, also, you can always say to the person, "Well, look, I know David Bilby. I know you worked for him for 3 years. What happens if I rang him up? What would he or she say?" You get a bit of an answer on that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But you just talk to people. I like to put the feet up on the desk and have a yak.
Yeah. I love to, when I'm interviewing candidates for whatever level position, I like to take them out for a meal or a coffee, partly because I want to see how they interact with service staff. Some people just
Great point.
Some people just ignore waiters or waitresses. They don't look them in the eye. They don't say thank you. I'm alert to observing people's behaviour in that situation because it tells you something about the character of that person.
That's a great point. I remember having lunch at the World Club. Not that I'm a member of the World Club, and I don't think I'll ever be a member of the World Club.
Doesn't exist now, does it?
Yeah, no, the World Club's there. Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been asked to join, but I like it, but it's not the sort of place I was there having lunch with a fellow who knew John Howard reasonably well. We were talking about cricket, and he said, I had John Howard here for lunch one day. We finished lunch. He walked into the kitchen. He thanked the cook.
Wow.
You thank the wait person and everything like that. So that is your point there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I mean, it's a bit like, you know, as you say, you're at a restaurant, someone comes to take your plate away. If the person doesn't say thank you, you think, oh, you're a bit of a pain in the ass. Oh, I'm with you. They're the little things, the intangible things that you pick up, standing back, letting you get out of the lift first, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good insight.
Important.
Yeah, very good. Research shows, Tony, as you know, that engaged staff are far more likely to be fulfilled in their careers. Engagement leads to the application of discretionary effort, and that can have a transformative impact on business metrics like productivity, like safety, innovation, and profit ultimately. How should executive leaders strengthen the engagement of their people? Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I think one of the first things is that you as the executive leader has got to make sure that person, he or she, actually understands their job.
Yeah.
David, your job is this. It's whether you're the mining crusher or you're underground supervisor and that sort of stuff.
Yep.
I think I can get the best out of you if I can say to you, what is your job? What is it you do?
Yeah.
And then, David, you tell me what resources you need to do your job.
Yeah.
And that sort of engages the person, and I think, oh, well, he or she's thinking about my job. Yeah. But one of the important things, at Genesis, we have a phrase, TALO, which is think and act like an owner.
Okay.
You've got to have that owner's mindset because the dollars you'll spend is your dollars and that sort of stuff. So to get the best out of people, engage them, be respectful, but demand that they do their job and demand that they're accountable.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I think you've touched on purpose, I think, there. People need to understand the value of their contribution to the bigger enterprise. And it may have a community focus to it.
Yeah.
A lot of people I interview say, look, I understand what the business does. I want to contribute to a better environment, a better society, a better world. Increasingly, that's the case with younger people, I find.
That's one of the questions I know you're going to ask me is about why do people want to work for your particular company?
Yeah, let's go there now. I mean, you as admittedly as a chairman, rather than an executive of Genesis Minerals, how would you expect your team to pitch the value proposition of Genesis Minerals to a senior person?
Well, obviously we should talk about the core values which drive your business, which can be accountability and that sort of. And if you take Genesis for argument's sake, our core value we call Aspire, ASPIRE. That's written on our chart. And A is for accountable, S for sustainable, P for people first, I for integrity, R for results, and E for empower. So what we do is we have these core values which come down from the board to all management. That's it's very important.
Yeah, it is indeed.
They're the core values of your business. Obviously integrity, empowering it, and I can remember when I took the job as chairman of Saracen, sitting there, and Saracen, I think, probably employed 300 or 400 people. I actually picked up the phone and I rang the HR lady and said, Marion, can I come to see you tomorrow? I want you to tell me why a 35-year-old wants to work for Saracen Minerals.
Okay.
So she got a thing out called the Maslow chart, which you would probably know, which is a pyramid, which I'd never heard of, right? Yeah. And it just showed you the reasons as to why. Wages used to be high, but now it's empowerment. Yeah. It's they listen to me. Yeah. Obviously, the terms and conditions you would know in your business, people look for the maternity leave, domestic violence leave, and that sort of stuff. But the feeling of if the employee feels that they're being listened to, they're being respected, and above all, I have a chance to improve myself. Yeah, that's very important. And you've got to demonstrate that core, and that comes through your core values. Yes, people first, empowering.
Yeah. No, it's a very good point. I have a view that many people are overmanaged but underled. So I'm drawing a distinction there between management and leadership. What do you think? Do you think enough business leaders understand that their job is to inspire people to become motivated to progress down the pathway towards achieving their objectives and building a better company?
David, a good manager would. One of the points I made in response to your last question was the person having a career advancement and empowerment. Yep. So if you overmanage a person, if you micromanage them, you're not giving that person the respect to do his or her job. So you've got to be careful in micromanaging and leading people. I've seen people who will just take someone by the nose, and at the end of the day, if you micromanage, the person does not develop character, and the ability to make his or own decision in a crisis situation.
Yeah.
Mining has its moments.
Yeah.
And if David Bilby has micromanaged Tony Kiernan and something happens, I can't get onto David because his phone's not working. So it's a balancing act. You can't lead them by the nose, but show them respect. Talk about their job.
Yep. It's amazing, isn't it, what you can achieve together when you don't care who gets the credit. And I think, a lot of business leaders perhaps need to reflect and say, am I showing enough humility here? Am I giving enough recognition to really inspire people?
Yeah, no, giving recognition. I mean, I think if I go back to when I was chairman of BCI a long time ago, and I've done this a couple of times, we're opening the mine, okay? And of course, the manager said, well, Tony, you can open the mine. The minister, I said, no, who is our longest serving employee?
Okay.
And that was Fred Nurk. And I said, well, Fred Nurk, whatever Fred Nurk's name was, I can't remember. I apologise for that. It's a long time ago. He cut the ribbon.
Nice touch.
He cut the ribbon.
Wow.
And at Pilbara Minerals, when we opened the mine at Pilbara Minerals, there were a lot of dignitaries there, and they all get up to thank the minister for giving up his time. And I got up there and I said, well, look, Minister, I'm glad you're here, but the ones who I really want to talk to are those that got this thing going. And I made a point of pointing out the geologist who was there as our longest serving employee and who was there when we had our first shipment of spodumene.
Wow.
And I gave him a lovely photo of the boat of the ship leaving.
Wow.
So that's they're the sort of thing.
And Fred Nurks will never forget that moment, nor will his peers that observed it.
No, well, that's sort of a bit of a mindset. I mean, I'm like you. I'm a talking head. Okay, I can talk. Okay, it's like when I remember I was chairman of Anglicare for a long time. And we used to have corporate breakfasts, and who we get to do? We get David Bilby, or we'll get the governor. I said, no, get someone who runs the domestic violence section, and they can come up and talk. It gave them an opportunity to talk about what they're doing, but it's telling the audience that you respect people who run your company, or in that case, run the charity of the domestic violence. And the person was able to regale stories which left mouths open. So. It's all respect, and you pick up a bit of reputation. Raleigh Finlayson at the moment, he's the I've dealt with Raleigh for a long time. He is a wonderful, wonderful person when it comes.
And
to
another
culture.
Guildford Grammar School boy, Tony.
Another Guildford Grammar School boy, but that's my other previous manager directors, Dale Henderson, Ken Brinson, Morgan Ball. They're all the same, the same. They were engaged. They'd go up on site, and they would even talk to you, David, if you were up there. Notwithstanding, they don't know who you are.
Good on you.
And now we take a short break to acknowledge our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Halo Civil Engineering. Halo is a multidiscipline civil contractor that specialises in the delivery of complex civil projects across defence, infrastructure, energy and resources. A West Australian company committed to delivering dynamic solutions with a focus on zero harm, while having a positive impact on their industry, clients and the people they serve. For more information, search for Halo Civil Engineering on socials or visit halocivil.com. If you'd like to inquire about sponsoring an episode of Hearts and Minds, please reach out to us on LinkedIn or via email info@ivyandgecko.com.au. Ivy and Gecko is a leading Australian talent and organisational consulting firm. We specialise in providing executive search and board consulting services to ASX small and mid-tier explorers, developers and producers in the gold and critical minerals industries. As the only executive search and leadership consulting firm to be admitted membership of the Minerals Council of Australia, Ivy and Gecko is uniquely resourced to advocate for the interests of our exploration, project development and mining clients.
Now, you lead a 7-person board at Genesis Minerals, 5 men, 2 women. As a chair, how do you manage that board dynamic and your relationship with the CEO? How do you encourage the best from your Neds so their contribution to the team effort is optimised?
Okay. The first step, David, is to make sure you've got the right Neds.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who join boards simply because they're retired lawyers, retired accountants, and wore a lovely suit. But I mean, I'm an old lawyer, and I've counseled people, I've given mentoring people who've decided to leave practice and want to go on a board. And I said, look, with great respect, I can get lawyers anywhere. I assume everyone can draft. I can get it. So you need to get the quality of the person on the board first, okay? Whether, you want a metallurgist, want a geologist, want a financial person, that sort of stuff. Once you've got them on, okay, now the best way to manage them is to use their skills. I'm a great believer in having relationship between management and boards, whereby the management can draw on the skills, but you've got to manage your board. I mean, as a chairman, I've gone out of the way to actually understand the psyche of each board member to the extent that I can, because I know there are certain areas where David Bilby might be a little bit prickly. I know he comes from a risk point of view. I know he comes from a sustainability point of view. So if there's a proposal up before the board, I'll talk to the managing director and say, Bilby gets a bit upset about dust, so you better give him a call. So I try and manage the process as I go through because I know what's going to get you fired up. And that sort of stuff. So,
very pragmatic approach.
Well, it is. I mean, it's so important to know your directors, and not only can they then do their job, but I'm a great believer in having, because directors have got to advise. I'm not a metallurgist. I'm just a busted arsehole lawyer. I'm not a metallurgist. I'm not, and I look at people who were brought on boards. I've had the privilege of bringing on 3 women on boards, which the first time they've been on public company boards. And people said, but Tony, what about corporate? I said, there's enough grey hair around this table to be able to do it. And I brought them on for a particular skill.
I remember a few years ago, might have been our first meeting, I asked the question, what do you most look for in a company director? And your answer was decency.
Oh, decency, no question about that.
As the top attribute. How much influence should a board have on driving the development of a business's culture?
I didn't ask the question about relationship with your CEO.
Yes.
Okay, which is obviously the role of a chair is really important. And the relationship, you ask anyone who's been in the business for a while, the relationship between a chair and a managing director is vital. One is that I can have that managing director help me manage the board. But, you just got to spend time with them. One of the most important things for a chairman is actually, what are we doing? What are we trying to do in our business? We're in a production, or we're in development, or whatever it is. If I've got that stuck in my mind, that's what, whenever I talk to the managing director, I can talk about those issues and that sort of stuff. And I always, you'll ask someone like Dale Henderson at Pilbara, who'd always say, Tony, always finish the conversation with, how's the day job? He might talk about a corporate issue and that sort of stuff. And I said, well, hang on, how's production and that sort of stuff? And
Do you encourage your fellow directors to have direct access with the executive team, or are you the conduit to the CEO?
No, I'm a direct access man. A lot of people won't do it. But as long as the managing director is aware of it. But David, as you know, there are certain managing directors who hate boards. Do not talk to them. I don't want my sustainability manager talking to any board. I'm the opposite. I think provided the board have respect and understand it. I mean, so I'm a great believer in having that relationship because, geez, directors have got some clues, I mean, if you've got Pilbara early days, we had a recovery issue, okay? I mean, recovery should have been 75%. It's going at 50%. I had people on the board who actually understood that, so they went and deal with management. So I'm a great believer in having a good relationship, a working relationship, and you'll find a good managing director will actually appreciate that.
Yeah. How much influence should the board have on the development of culture within a business? I mean, is that the executive's job to drive culture development, or to what extent does the board influence
obviously, the man in the day job. Boards aren't, we're not there day by day. Culture will, people say it comes from the top, comes from the board. In the main, it really comes from the managing director. And when you employ your managing director, you know that that's one of his or her jobs. So whilst you may not personally drive the culture, you have engaged someone who will drive the culture. But the board need to be aware of it and that sort of stuff. And governance issues, I mean, there's governance issues which have taken place of late, which are causing people a little bit of concern. Well, they're culture issues that the board should have addressed. So the day-to-day, like the workshop manager is the one that will push the culture in his or her division. Okay.
Let's talk about some of the challenges, opportunities facing the mining industry. I'm aware, Tony, that tertiary institutions are pumping out fewer mining engineers and geologists and metallurgists. There is a significant downturn in the production of mining professionals entering the industry. So what can the industry do to better attract and engage young professionals?
It gets back to a question you asked me a little while ago, which I said, why does someone want to work for this particular company? Obviously, your terms and conditions need to be okay. the terms and conditions need to be okay, the long service leave, domestic violence and that sort of stuff. I think at the end of the day, if you can talk to a person about, if your company gets known as having a good culture, and I talked about the Aspire at Genesis, it's difficult, but obviously you change rosters. You don't. I mean, when I started in the industry, I think it might have been 10 weeks on and 1 week off, and then 6 weeks on and 1. Now it's 4 and 2 or whatever, or 8 days.
And you go up to a luxury resort.
8 days. But actually, attracting people to work in the industry is difficult. But one thing that we have done in our companies is to allow people to come and work during the gap year.
Wow.
Because, we make it clear or known that we have, if you want a gap year, you can come up on site, put the fluoro on, and you can work with our people. And that helps them to actually understand a little bit about the industry and that sort of stuff. And with some people, it overcomes the fear. I mean, imagine if you're a director of Woodside, a lot of your employees get shit thrown at them at the pub. I mean, Woodside's a fantastic company, but fossil fuels. So, no, but I said we encourage gap years and bring young people on.
That's a good initiative. I don't think the education system does enough to inform young people what mining is all about. I think at primary school level, schools should have organised trips to mine sites so the kids can actually see what occurs on a mine site or in a processing plant. And the same at high school as well. There's no doubt that to some extent mining's got an image problem. It's got a marketing problem. And whilst some companies, high-profile ones in the main, have made mistakes, environmentally, socially, they've done the wrong thing, and it get publicised much more than the good news. The press likes nothing more than bad news and cutting tall poppies off. So I think it's partly an education system challenge that we've got.
It is, and also having people understand that working in the mining industry is not just being a geologist or not just being a bogger operator. I mean, you look at in the safety, the environmental, diversity and all that, ESG is offering the opportunity for a lot of people which weren't there 15 or 20 years ago.
Yes.
Because, you spend a lot of time on that. So the person who has a bit of an environmental bent or like and that sort of stuff, he or she will have an opportunity to work in the mining industry.
And the impact of technology, everyone's talking about AI these days and the impact it has on all industries, including the mining industry. I mean, you and I are of an age where, what's AI? But there will be technologically trained and literate people that will help the mining industry advance.
Well, that's a good point because, obviously, we try to go for low cost. We go for EVs and that sort of stuff. And, a lot of these machineries that Caterpillar and that sort are actually data collectors. They collect data.
Yes.
So, there is a role for an IT guy.
Yeah,
sort of
indeed. Increasingly so.
Yeah.
Tony, do you see the emphasis on risk assessment restricting company initiatives, and do you see it impacting shareholder returns?
Short answer, yes.
Okay.
Risk is very much part of our business, but people tend to sometimes look at a proposal from a risk point of view first. I'd like a different word than risk. I don't quite know why we use that word risk, but
what word would you choose?
I don't know, matters to consider and that sort of stuff. But I do think people do get a bit gun shy on risk.
Okay.
And it's something you've got. I've spoken to directors about. Look, when we get a proposition, if you do look at it from the value point of view first, risk is important, but let's look at the project, look at the person, that sort of stuff. Worry about risk, dust, port, and that sort of later on. So yes, I think risk does kill things a little bit. Yeah. It needs to be very much in our mind, but you'll end. I think if we go too far down the track, a lot of good people, there are certain entrepreneurs in Western Australia who are difficult guys, whether they're Ellisons or Forrests or Goyd or Bill Beam and that sort of stuff. Yeah. They're going to get to a stage where they say, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered putting up with all this crap. So, yes, I think risk is a bit of and it's up to the chairman of a company to manage that. Yeah. And I said, it gets back to the point that I said, know your directors. If you've got a director who's got a penchant for risk, talk to him or her first. So it doesn't come up at a board meeting.
On a related topic, project approval processes, very tortuous, long process very often. We just look at a recent example of McPhillamys in New South Wales. Now, the Regis board and executive obviously were very disappointed. They'd invested very heavily over a long period of time. And the Minerals Council of Australia is saying, okay, we should have a one-stop shop, a front door approach that integrates and simplifies state and federal approvals processes. Do you have a view on this? Because it seems to me that, we are at risk of reducing our attractiveness as a mining investment jurisdiction.
Obviously, some people would take that into consideration. I mean, the Regis one was outrageous. I mean, they get every approval under the sun. They dealt with the Indigenous people. They did everything correctly. And suddenly, and I think for political reasons is what the Minister Tony Kiernan did. If that happens too often, of course, that questions us as a jurisdiction. Hopefully it's a one-off. The government is talking about a one-shop place for all this. If you have, if the approvals for your mining are simply located in a bureaucratic situation, as opposed to, because if the decision-making process rests with the minister is part of a cabinet that understands royalties, revenues, and that sort of stuff. But if it's just simply a non-political organisation, they can get ideological without worrying about balance sheets and that sort of stuff. So I worry that if they put too much power into, say, the Environmental Protection Authority, at the end of the day, the minister's got to make decisions. Look, the Regis one I thought was outrageous. I really did.
I do wonder what someone like Kuan from Singapore would do if he was head of a mining jurisdiction like Western Australia. What sort of policy regime would he install?
Yeah, I think probably a good one. I mean, he may go a little bit over the top, I don't know. But certainly, I mean, you can't, I understand the song lines and those sort of issues with the Indigenous and that sort of stuff. But, gee, it's got to be sensible. But I mean, what's the one in Regis? Is the Bumblebee, the triple B that no one's ever seen, and that sort of stuff. So Lee Kuan Yew would probably drive it a little bit harder.
Yeah, I reckon he would. You've been around for some time. You've seen leaders come and go. When you think about people who've been in leadership positions, whether it be business, sport, the creative arts, who do you most admire and why?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people to admire, but I've been asked that question before. And it gets back to how do you get the best out of people? I've answered that I was interviewed by, someone said, if you had three people come to dinner, who would you have? Yeah. Everyone goes Margaret Thatcher, Sister Teresa. I went Kevin Sheedy. And someone said, why? Because Kevin Sheedy's the guy. I said, legend. Because when he was coach of Essendon, he had about 40 guys on the playing list. He had James Hird at the top, who was very smart. And down the bottom, he probably had Daryl Kickett, who really came from a poor background. He had to get the best out of each one of those. And with James Hird, you could just say, James, you don't kick on the left foot in the first quarter. When he's dealing with a boy who came from Darwin, you talk to them differently. And the ability to get the best out of your people, such a diverse thing, and that's why I picked Kevin Sheedy, because he got the best out of David Bilby. He got Tony Kiernan over there, who's a busted ass, came from a broken family. He's got to talk to Tony a little bit differently than David.
That's a great answer. Kevin Sheedy, how long, he was at the Bombers for so long as senior coach, wasn't he?
He was, and he brought a different brand of football too. But
he did, and I guess Ron Barassi to some extent might be in the same mould.
Well, Barassi was in a different mould. Barassi was I'm not going to quote some of the Barassi sayings about where your ability came through for the eye of your father's old fella. But different. He was a bit of a yelling square. But no, it gets back to the point. How do you get the best out of your employees? How does Kevin Sheedy get the best out of? I mean, you talk of the guy who coached Brisbane Lions, who's now escapes me now. They won the flag. He's obviously got something.
Boss.
No. This year, the coach, the old fella. Who didn't play AFL football himself. But getting the best out of people it's like junior sport. I mean, have you ever coached junior sport?
I have actually.
I've
very unsuccessful.
Well, no, I've done it for a long time. I did it for a long time with my son Ben. I've seen guys rip shit out of a 10-year-old. Okay. Now, if you scream at a 10-year-old, you're going to go home. He's never want to play again, will he? How you get the best out of a young fella is to say, David, don't hook early on. Do not do this. And just, getting the best out of people is so important. And football coaches these days are different. I mean, the Barassi was the yell and scream. Do something. These days, you hold your hand a little bit.
In 2008, Tony, I was the senior coach of the St Ives under-9s football team, AFL team. This is in the days I lived in Sydney. I think there was something like 15 games in the season. We won one game out of 15, and on that occasion that we won, I was off skiing at Thredbo, and my 15-year-old assistant coach took the team to victory that day. So I don't have a great track record.
That would have been your only year of coaching, David. You would have believed you would have been running the drinks after.
Oh, look,
I can tell you.
You're very kind, Tony. Thank you. A few more questions. What have you changed your mind about recently?
As I said to you, you asked me this question earlier on. What I've changed my mind about is the USA's ability to act rationally, given the election yesterday.
Yeah.
Although, you could argue that they were acting rationally because, Trump was a man who offered a vision.
But most people make decisions on the basis of emotion, not rationality.
Yeah, they do. And obviously Trump was his MAGA of all the political slogans I've seen in my life. That is probably the best. Make America great.
But it's
again.
not original. Didn't Ronald Reagan have that?
He may would have done, but it's not make America great. You put again on the end, and people have I've lost it. It's like when they did Brexit.
Yeah,
it was the those who didn't want to go into Brexit. We want to take control. No, that didn't work. They put take control back.
Yeah, right.
So it tells the people you've
fires
lost
you up.
Well, yeah, but because it demonstrated we've actually lost something.
Yeah,
make America great again.
Whatever you think of Trump, he's a marketeer. He's a theatre man, and it's obviously effective.
Well, you and I could talk all day about Donald Trump.
Tell me the best career or business advice you've ever been given.
One that comes to mind was my father. When and as I said, we were a transport family. Dad left the school at the age of 16 and ran the family transport business, and then eventually finished his life as a managing director of Channel 9 in Perth. When I left school, I didn't quite know what to do, and he said, "Go and get yourself a defined discipline." And that's when I decided to make law, because he said, "Son, you can always fall back on that."
Yeah.
So, I've got a lot of other people giving me things, but I've always remembered Dad saying, "Son, go and do law," because that will give you something to fall back on, a defined discipline.
Good advice. How about this one? If you had to be transported to a decade of the 20th century to live the rest of your life, which decade would you choose?
Going forward?
No, going back. So if you had to be transported back to the 20th century...
The 20th century, not the 20th century.
Yeah. So which decade, the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, where would you want to live? In which decade?
Probably the 1960s, I suppose. I was very much into music. I'd like to be able to say 1990 if the Dockers may have won a flag, but I don't think they've won a flag. Oh, I don't know, David.
Were you a hippie love child back in the 60s, Tony?
I can't tell you about what my lifestyle was when I was at university. It's difficult to go back in time, but, the values change and that sort of stuff. And I'm not one of these people who say, if only I'd lived in the 1980s or 1990s. I don't. I live in 2024.
I'd pick the 70s, probably my most formative decade. Disco era, why not? What type?
Saturday Night Fever.
That one, yep. What type of activity bores you?
People talking about things other than tool time.
Okay.
Board meetings when we tend to wander a little bit into esoterical things like gender diversity, which are very important. Yeah. But I've got to admit, once I understand it, they bore me a little bit.
Yeah. What excites you? What really gets you out of bed in the morning?
The fact that I'm still alive. The fact that I'm not aching to it. No, look, I enjoy it.
You're only 74, Tony.
What do you mean only? Thank you, David. I enjoy early mornings. I quite often I get up early.
Best time of day.
And I actually plan myself a little bit. It's like on a Sunday, every Sunday afternoon about 2:00, I'll stop what I'm doing and reflect on what the week is. Yeah. Because you can organise yourself and that sort of stuff. And sometimes if I've got a meeting coming up, say on a Wednesday, as opposed to just reading the papers on a Wednesday morning, I'll do it on a Monday afternoon because I'll work out how much time I need to do. Yeah. So I get up and I actually plan my day. I'm not slavish about it, but I look and say, okay, I got up this morning. Yeah. I had removals coming at 7:30. Yep. I had you at 11, and I know I've got to go to lunch with a guy at 1:30. So I just plan my day.
Do you indulge in power naps in the afternoon to re-energise you for the rest of the day?
Yes.
I do as well.
Look at my age. No, that's true. And but I do plan where I'm going for the day and that sort of stuff, because it's you get rid of those emails, stuff early on, and then you can think about your day. Yeah.
Tony, I've known you for several years, and every time I've rung you up, once every 6 months or so, you're very generous. You listen to me. I don't think you've said no to an invitation to catch up for a coffee or a podcast. So thank you. It's appreciated. I think we've learned a bit about you personally. We've learned a bit about your philosophy about leadership and engagement. And thank you for your contributions to the mining industry. And thanks for coming along to Hearts and Minds today.
No, David. I've known you for a long time, and I knew you when you were in your old firm, and then this one. And what I admire is that you get off your backside and do it.
Good on you.
You're out marketing. I understand this is a marketing exercise, but such is life. You know? So I admire you for your tenacity.
Thank you, Tony. I have fun meeting people like you. So thank you, and all the best.
All right. Well, thank you very much, David. Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.